So for those that have landed there, because that was my story, I hit rock bottom numerous times. Like I just, for people that are in that spot, what therapies and treatments, do you individually, and then I'd love to also hear, from innovative medicine's perspective too, like as a true holistic practice, what are the ways that we can start healing when you're at that rock bottom and then kind of coming up to the lighter in the day-to-day for maintenance and support and maybe even optimization?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first off, I think we need to acknowledge that hitting rock bottom, while it seems like a horrible thing, is a good thing, right? It's only up from there. You really,
Exactly.
You never know when rock bottom is, of course, and that's the crux of it until you look back on it. But I mean, I think anyone that's hit rock bottom and looks back on it can say it's been a blessing. Rock bottom changes you. Rock bottom, puts you in a position where everything looks better. There's a polarity of life. You can't have happiness without sadness, right? You can't have love without the other side of it. You can't have hot without cold. And that's what people need to sort of understand, that there are going to be some rock bottoms in your life, some difficult times and challenges. I think the difference a lot for sensitives is most of the time, those rock bottoms aren't external factors. They're in yourself. They're in your own head. Yeah. For me, it definitely was. I can't, pinpoint. I've spoken to so many people over the years with external factors. Someone died very early. They were injured horribly in an accident, or, all these different factors. They grew up in a place where it was so poor they didn't have food or clean water. A lot of the people I speak to that are on the sensitive side actually don't have that story. But they still suffer. And it's no one's place to put a number on the suffering or compare suffering. That you didn't, that you had clean water versus someone else doesn't mean that you didn't suffer. Maybe you suffered even more in your head and kept yourself in a suffering spot because you kept, reiterating it in your head. And I think that's where a lot of sensitives are, as you said. They let their thoughts get the most of them. And I know for me, this thing is on like 24/7. It's just like nonstop, just running every single possible, circumstance and series of events that could happen. And a lot of them are negative, or at least they used to be, and they still are. But I think that's where people need to start, is first off, rock bottom is sometimes a great place to be. It gets up from there. You have so much that you could look forward to almost from there, in a sense. And you have a lot of control over it. I think that's where medicine a lot of times fails people. They say, hey, you're at rock bottom. We're going to give you a diagnosis. There isn't much you could do about it. Just take this pill and hope for the best. It's like, really? That's it? Like, that is the nocebo effect, as other like Joe Dispenza and others talk about. When you go see that doctor and they're like, oh, you got a 20% chance to live, like suddenly, yeah, you do. You didn't before you heard that, but in your head, you're already making that happen. And most sensitive, or most people in their head, will ruminate over that. And they will literally manifest that. It will start to feel worse based off that information, even though it may not be truthful information, at least to you.
So true. So
I think, a lot of times you need to step away from those external factors that may be there, like doctors, everything else, and really start to assess the situation in a lighter way, I would say, in a way where you're not so much getting in your head. And for me, that really changed when I started implementing certain techniques, both around meditation, breathing, because most of the times, if you realize this, stop right now, even if you're listening to this. When was the last time you took a deep breath? Like really, for like a few. In a day that most people work 9 to 5 nonstop, they don't stop at all. They don't breathe in, breathe out. They're just shallow breathing, activating sympathetic, not oxygenating enough, not doing these things that allow us to actually be in a healthy state, which lead to a healthy mind also. And so those little pieces, then starting to implement other things like Ho'oponopono, a spiritual practice that you could start to release certain belief systems you may have that are keeping you in a downward vicious cycle in your head. And really trying to practice that, and gratitude, right? Gratitude journals are wonderful. And it seems so silly, right? When you tell someone, wake up and write one thing you're grateful for. It's a terrible day. It's raining outside. I feel like crap. It's like, be grateful that you have a pen in your hand to write something. Just write that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for this pen to write in this gratitude journal.
Mm-hmm.
Start there. I'm grateful that I've a bed to sleep, any type of, or I'm grateful I have a shirt to wear. I'm grateful that I'm alive. I'm grateful I could breathe one breath, whatever it is. You could always be grateful for something. I mean, if you really want to read a book and find out what you could be grateful for, Viktor Frankl's Search for Meaning, like, yeah, you could be grateful while you're going through the Holocaust in a concentration camp. Then come on, you could be grateful for something. And that shifts it alone. Those are, you want to try and shift your perspective, because most of the sensitives are caught in negative loops that take them down into the negative side that, start to manifest and really keep you in that downward spiral. And then I think once you kind of go into those pieces that are things you could do at home a lot. And again, I think there's journaling, there's affirmation, there's visualizations, there's tons of little things you could do. And most of the time people want to jump over those little things and kind of go, what's the treatment? What's the pill for me?
Yep.
Those things have such a bigger impact on your life than most of the advanced treatments we even do at our center. Like the center is what we do here at our medical clinic can serve as catalysts, can absolutely have a profound impact. But they're not going to be given to you every single day. You're going to have other bad days. You might have the next rock bottom show up. Those things, the meditation, everything, those are the foundational pillars for at least helping you get out of the rock bottom quicker. It's not to say you won't have them. It's not to say you won't find sorrow and, negative events in your life. Those are going to happen. They're bound to happen. What I've realized, I used to be this person when I got a piece of information, I would process it in every single way I could, build up so much stress in my body over that, think about how it's going to all go wrong instead of right, and sit with it as long as possible.
I don't know what you're talking about at all. I don't know what you're talking about at all. I've never done that. Never done that.
Right? And again, so many people do it, right? It's that one email. And this is why, don't check your email throughout the day. Do sparse it out once or twice a day. I want to get to the point where I'm like Tim Ferriss and just have an automatic responder that I only check this once a week. And, if it's really important, get in touch with someone else. I'm not there yet, but I try not to check it so much. I try not to be so much on my phone. Although this day and age, you jump on Instagram, you do this and that. It's okay as long as you have the tools where you don't do what I'm talking about right now, which is let it affect you.
Yeah.
And so that information would come, bad piece. Oh, you didn't get this deal, or, someone's leaving the company, and it would just hit me. And it'd be the initial reaction was wow, this is terrible. This is terrible news. And then I would just think about it and, step away from my desk, upset, get angry at people's stress, not eat right, not be breathing right? All these things, the opposite of what I was just saying, you should do. But then you have these tools and you start to implement, literally step away from that, problem for a second, take a few deep breaths even, and start to reposition it. Okay, maybe this is an opportunity for us. Maybe that person leaving that I thought was really great, they're leaving for a reason. And that could be a good thing. We can now fill it in with someone else, maybe. So you start to flip the maybes from this, maybe it's the end of the world, which it absolutely is never, to maybe this is a good thing. And then you start to implement those. Let me meditate on it now. Let me take 10 minutes to step away and just clear my head and then see how I feel. And is it coming from the heart a little bit? Or is it coming from the brain that's always can have these negative belief systems? And you start to implement those things. And again, if we want to go over to the therapy side of it, because I think there is a lot, you could build in a lot of psycho-emotional type ones. One that's really good is neuroemotional technique, because sometimes we store emotions about negative things within our body in certain energy points, and we don't know that. And that's impacting our not just energy flow, but how cells communicate, regeneration, everything else. And that's just a way of hanging on to an emotion and clearing it, either through the vagus nerve stimulation that connects our sympathetic system, or through tapping in certain ways, kind of like EFT does. Emotional freedom technique tapping is something that lots of people go through. If it's more traumatic, you could do something like EMDR, which is wonderful for PTSD and other things. And then you could go into other areas such as the biochemical side. And a lot of times when you're in chronic stress, you are losing a ton of nutrients. You're losing a ton of different things that are essential for you to even think clearly. So one of the things we've seen, not in addictive people, in people through chronic disease, Lyme disease, mold toxicity, all these, and even neurodegenerative diseases, is NAD infusions. It's one of the reasons we created our product to take what was in the infusion into a supplement. Our Nadovim NAD supplement was because so many people are so stressed out. And NAD is the one thing that stress, really depletes. And for those that don't know, NAD is a coenzyme that's just as important as basically oxygen. Every single cell in your body needs it. And if it's depleted, your mitochondria don't function properly, which are the powerhouses. Your cells don't function, and then you don't function because you're just trillions of cells. So, when you look at like macro to micro, you could do so much, and you have to understand that when you're in that chronic state, things are going to start to go wrong because you're chronically there. But that's where I say stress is necessary. Stress is a part of life. Your sympathetic and parasympathetic, they have to be both active. You can't just be chill all the time. That wouldn't be good. You'd be too far on one side. That could lead to degeneration also. So, but I think it's just about changing how you take in the input. And again, think about if someone called you right now and just told you that someone very close to you died. That's just a piece of information. That's it. But you would have a profound reaction to it. How long? That's up to you. And it's true. You should have an emotional reaction. You should have a shock reaction. But how long are you going to let that? People let that consume them for their whole lives sometimes. Yeah. And we see them in here all the time, and they do manifest as cancer, as, lung conditions, heart condition. You could say it all manifests differently based, of course, sometimes your predisposition and genetics or other weaknesses in your body. But you could do all the biochemical work you want on those types of conditions, but until you address the real cause, which is usually emotional, psychological, then you're going to be in a reoccurrence. It'll pop up somewhere else sooner or later. And that's why I think it's really, really important to not just use medical tools, as I mentioned here. And there are so many others. You could look at energy balancing, because that's a big one. Sometimes, energetically, we're not there. And I don't mean like energy like ATP. I mean the meridians, and more from a, traditional sense of every single society talked about before ours.
Vibrational.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So there are so many, and I think that's the beauty of what we are trying to do. I know what you do as well. You have tons of options. It always bothers me just a little bit when I hear people that I know, I've exhausted every option. And it's like, okay, let me hear this. I sit them down. I'm like, okay, tell me how you've exhausted every option on earth ever humanly devised. Well, I did. I went to 3 doctors and I tried a new diet and I'm done with it. It's like, my goodness, do you know how many options you still have? Do you know how many things? You should be so happy. And to know there are so many people out there that are willing to help you if you just look, if you just seek it, if maybe you just sit back and let it come to you even. So many people had that epiphany that I've met that are sick. And they're like, I was at the end of my road. I was contemplating suicide. And I just sat back and said, whatever you believe in, Lord, universe, doesn't matter. Just help me. I don't know what to do. I'm not there. And then something would happen. A call would come. They'd pick up a book and read about a person that got better, or they'd see something online and they would end up either here or somewhere, but in a better place because of that. But they allowed it to happen. They allowed it to kind of surrender, let go, apply something they practice, which is just, kind of the letting go and breathing, whatever it is. And it came. And I think it really would to anyone that truly would allow that to happen. And that's another practice, just surrender, letting go, right? That's a tough one for a lot of people, but it is a practice of sorts. And that's something I would absolutely recommend for people.